Trucker Dump for July 17th, 2014, Episode 103, 6 Causes of Tired Truckers.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com. Resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Hey, hello to all my trucker listeners out there. And my non-trucker listeners? ToddMcCann here. You know, I don't really actually know if any non-truckers actually listen to this show. Write in if you do. Let me know. I'd be interested to know if you find this at all amusing or if you're just so bored. Maybe you tried it and didn't like it. I don't know. Let me know. I'm at ToddMcCann on Twitter. That's 2 Ds, 2 Cs, and 2 Ns. Or you can contact me with through email, truckerdump@gmail.com. Anyway, give me a ring. Let me know. So, what do we got going on first? Well, hopefully we can get through this episode because I tried to start recording earlier and man, oh man, it started pouring outside. I mean, the truck was rocking left and right. The mic was shaking even. There was no way I could have recorded. So it's let up for a while. Got some peace and quiet at one of our yards. So hopefully we'll have a decent session here. And as you can tell, this is the second time I'm trying to wing it through this intro. No script. Just going off some notes here. Okay, y'all, I guess I owe you an apology. It's been almost 2 months since my last podcast, something like that. Been kind of busy. It's summer. It's so stinking hot in this truck. I'm burning. I'm sweating right now. It's hard to find quiet, and you know, it's every time I turn my truck off, it gets hot, and my computer gets hot, and I have to turn a fan on it every, 5 minutes or so and let it cool down for a while, or else I get the fan noise. Yes, excuses, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I haven't been screwing off the whole time. I have been busy on some other projects too. More will be revealed on those later on. So what else is up? Well, I guess a big thank you is in order to all my fellow truckers. That's because it's National Truck Driver Appreciation Week. Well, I guess by the time this comes out, actually half of that week will be gone. But hey, I'm never on time for anything. Speaking of never being on time, you remember Rudolph Foods, the pork rind company? They did the Super Bowl contest last year that I did on this podcast. And it gave us all, a chance to win some money and have a Super Bowl party and get some free pork rinds. Well, quite honestly, the reason I did that for them was because they asked me to do the Truck Driver Appreciation Week contest last year, but I screwed up, procrastinated a bit too long, and didn't get in on it. So I was really happy when they contacted me again and asked me if I could help out. And this time I can. Here's what's going on. For National Truck Driver Appreciation Week, Rudolph Foods wants to congratulate all you truckers and show their appreciation. They've got a contest, $1,500 and a year's supply of pork rinds. Here's what they need you to do. They need you to take a picture of your rig. That's from the outside or maybe an interior shot, whatever you think is going to be the best. You're going to go to porkrind.com, upload the images on the photo uploader there, or they have a way to do it on Facebook too. You can get all this information by going to porkrinds.com. Okay, then on August 18th, a panel that they have there will choose 8 of the photos. Then they'll post those 8 photos, and everybody can go and vote on them from August 20th to September 20th. And the winner will be announced on September 22nd. So this time you got plenty of time to get those photos in, get a chance at $1,500, which is more than anybody else is going to offer you for National Truck Driver Appreciation Week. Heck of a lot more than some Reese's Pieces or something. So head on over to porkrinds.com and thank Rudolph Foods for doing this by sending in your pictures. What else is going on? Well, one of my listeners actually loaned me some audiobooks. I don't usually listen to fiction, so I was like, whatever. But then he told me it was mostly nonfiction, like autobiographies and stuff like that. In particular, he had the Steve Jobs autobiography, which I really wanted to hear. Well, I did get it listened to. It was pretty good, although I do have to say, I'm a little disappointed. I'm a Apple junkie. I love Apple products, and I love what Steve Jobs did for the company. I love having the iPhone. I love my Mac, which I record this podcast on all the time. But I would really prefer to have worse products and him to have been less of a jerk in his life. If I'd have met him face to face, I'd have hated his guts. He seemed just mean to pretty much everybody. He seemed to think the world revolved around him. He was on this, Buddha enlightenment thing or whatever to find enlightenment. And I guess what he got out of that was that, the world revolved around him. The rules didn't apply to him, and that he could just treat everybody like crap. I don't know. Doesn't sound like much of a philosophy to me. But anyway, it was a good read. I appreciate the guy loaning it to me, and I will delete it because it would be illegal if I kept it, and I don't do that kind of thing. So, you who loaned me that book, you know who you are. I do appreciate it. So let's get on with today's podcast. This was actually spurred on by something Kevin McCaig wrote. That's at Kevin of MI on Twitter. He also wrote a blog post and did a podcast, actually did the voice work for it. Really appreciate that. That was Trucker Dump 88. It was called You Can't See America from the Trucker's Lounge. That was a pretty good one. Talks about how you can get out of the truck and travel around instead of just sitting in the Trucker's Lounge the whole time, which is exactly the opposite of what I do. I sit in here and make podcasts and stuff. Well, at least I'm being somewhat productive, I guess. Anyway, he wrote this little thing about why truckers are really tired. It was just a really short little ditty, but I thought, there's a lot more reasons than that. And the other thing that spurred this on was the big story about the Walmart driver who crashed into Tracy Morgan's vehicle. And so this is where this idea came from. So let's get on with it. Today we talk about 6 causes of tired truckers. Well, that's just dandy. The entire non-trucking world is already convinced we truckers are all driving around with those gross eye boogers, and now we get a high-profile story in the media that confirms their fear of tired truckers. Now, the only way you wouldn't know what I'm talking about is if you've been doing missionary work in the jungles of Uganda. So here's the basics. A Walmart driver recently slammed his truck into the back of a vehicle carrying comedian and actor Tracy Morgan of 30 Rock and Saturday Night Live, and some of his friends. One of them was killed, while Morgan and the others were critically injured. Apparently, sometime before the crash, the truck driver had bragged on Twitter about being awake for at least 24 hours. Brilliant. Just brilliant. Just what the trucking industry needs. Jeez Louise, driver. Why don't you just tattoo a giant red target on your forehead? I've included a link in the show notes to this story, just in case you have been doing missionary work. So, is it true? Are all truckers driving tired? For the most part, the answer is no. Most of us know when to get off the road before it's too late. Although clearly, this case proves that there is at least some truth behind the allegations. Now, I haven't spoken to this particular Walmart driver, but I have spoken to a few others. They assure me that if there's a procedure or a safety device available, Walmart has implemented or installed it. Walmart even made a statement that their electronic logs show the driver was legal at the time of the accident. How can that be? How can a driver be awake for over 24 hours and still be legal to drive? First off, let me say I totally believe that the driver was officially legal to drive. I have an electronic log system in my truck similar to the one Walmart has. Most of the large trucking companies do nowadays. And for the record, I don't care what some obnoxious truckers say. If the carrier wants to make their e-logs tamper-proof, they can do it. I can't edit diddly squat on my e-logs, and according to the Walmart drivers I've talked to, they can't either. So if this guy's logs say he was running legal, I buy it. But that doesn't mean he should have been driving. I'll explain as I go through the 6 causes of tired truckers, in no particular order. Number 1 cause of tired truckers, the 14-hour rule. All truckers must adhere to HOS rules, that's hours of service, set forth by the FMCSA, that's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is under the DOT, that's Department of Transportation. For the record, we drivers pretty much hate everything about all 3 of those abbreviations. If you want a full detailed description of the hours of service rules, please check out Trucker Dump 94, Understanding the New Hours of Service Rules. We just don't have time for it here. The rule that's the biggest culprit in making tired truckers is the 14-hour rule. The 14-hour rule says that a driver cannot drive past the 14-hour mark from when they started their day. For example, if a driver started at 8 a.m., they must not get behind the wheel after 10 p.m. without first taking a legal 10-hour break. They can, however, work after the 14-hour mark. So they could fuel, unload a trailer, or replace a taillight. But the trucker cannot drive again without getting that 10-hour break first. I hate the 14-hour rule primarily because I now feel pressure to drive even if I'm tired. If we truckers want to maximize our time, we often don't have time to stop and take a nap if we need one. Nor can we pull over and wait out rush hour. Now that's really stupid. I don't know about you, but I'm guessing most of the public would appreciate fewer big trucks clogging the highways at peak hours. Durr. But you know what? There is a way to extend the 14-hour workday. That's good for us truckers, right? Well, here's where we can get into some sleepy time trouble. Number 2 cause of tired truckers, long load or unload times. There is one exception to the 14-hour rule. If a driver logs a continuous 8 hours in the sleeper berth at any time after they start their day, the 14-hour day can be extended. When a driver uses this 8-hour break to extend his day, we call it splitting, because we now have to get our mandatory 10-hour break by splitting it into 2 segments, one of 8 hours and the other of 2 or more. Splitting sleeper berth time sucks for everyone. It's meant to give us drivers flexibility, but all it does for most of us is confuse us to the point that we have to stop into the nearest Costco for a bulk pack of extra strength Excedrin. Bonus? It's got caffeine. The even sadder thing about being able to extend the 14-hour period is that it usually doesn't accomplish its goal. The rule makers are willing to let you extend the time because they think you're sleeping the whole time. Well, they'd be as wrong as a Hindu inhaling a Big Mac. As a matter of fact, here's how it worked for me when this happened just the other day. I had slept a full 8 hours of my 10-hour break, and I eagerly headed out to pick up my load, which was supposed to be ready anytime after 3:30 p.m. I did my 15-minute pre-trip inspection and drove 45 minutes to the shipper, arriving at 8 p.m. Sadly, my good mood is instantly squashed when the security guard said the load wouldn't be ready until 4 a.m. Okay, so now what? Well, I immediately put my stupid electronic log onto line 3 sleeper berth, since extending your 14-hour day can only be done if the entire 8-hour break is logged as sleeper berth time. Okay, so I immediately go straight back to bed and sleep for 8 hours, right? No. I just slept 8 hours. I got a better chance of becoming the next pope than falling asleep again. So instead, I procrastinate writing a blog post by watching some movies and playing QuizUp on my iPhone. By the way, my QuizUp username is ToddMcCann if you're feeling macho enough to challenge me. That's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. No spaces. So anyway, the time finally passes and I restart my day. So how many hours can I still drive? Well, I only used 45 minutes of my 11 hours drive time earlier, so I still have 10 hours and 15 minutes to drive. But the 14-hour rule also still applies to my new starting time. So I use 45 minutes of drive time and 15 minutes of on-duty time. So that's 1 full hour of working time against my 14 hours. So I have to get the 10.5 hours of driving done within 13 hours. Now that all sounds fine, possibly a bit confusing, but remember, I've already been awake since approximately 7 p.m. It's now 4 a.m., so that's 9 hours I've been awake already. But my logs tell me I have 10 1/4 hours to drive, meaning I could legally be behind the wheel until 5 p.m. if I wind up needing the whole 13 hours available on my 14-hour rule. Okay, since that sentence was about as confusing as a fur coat wearing PETA member, let me make it easy by saying that by the end of my shift, I could have possibly been awake for 22 hours. So what do you think most truckers do? We load up on caffeine and hit the road. That's what we do. Remember, most over-the-road drivers don't get paid when we're moving. Now, the smart ones know to pull over when they get too sleepy, but I'll not lie and say that all truckers know when to call it quits. Clearly, Mr. Roper thought his load was more important than his life. Or in this case, someone else's life. Sad. Extending the 14-hour rule is a great idea that in practice works about as well as booger-flavored candy. Okay, bad example there. While grown-ups would hate that, kids would probably make it a bestseller. How about broccoli-flavored candy? Yeah, that works much better. Even adults wouldn't want that. Unless, of course, you're a weird adult. And since you're listening to this podcast, I'd say that's a good possibility. The number 3 cause of tired truckers: uncertainty of our next load. Most trucking companies try to let their drivers know what their next load is before they deliver their current one. These are called pre-plans. They pre-plan us for 2 reasons. 1, to stay ahead of the game to keep you moving, and 2, so that we truckers can schedule our day to get sufficient sleep. If you're still going to have hours to drive when you get unloaded, naturally they'll try to give you a load that picks up near you ASAP. But if you're nearly out of time, they'll try to pre-plan your next load so that it gives you just enough time to get a legal 10-hour break and hit the road again. But it doesn't always work out that way. To explain how this can make truckers tired, let's say you slept all night and you get up and drive 2 hours to get unloaded. You still haven't got your pre-plan yet. Maybe there just isn't much freight moving. Or maybe your dispatcher or the much-hated planners just dropped the ball. Who knows? By the way, there's a link to the much-hated planners. I've wrote a whole blog post about them. I hate them so much. Anyway, finally your satellite beeps. You say a silent prayer for a decent load and then mumble a naughty word when you see that it picks up 10 hours from now. Again, you've only driven for 2 hours, so you still have 9 hours left to drive. Now what? Again, you can't sleep because you just slept all night. And by the time you're getting sleepy, it's time to go pick up that load that needs to keep moving all night in order to deliver on time. So you won't have time to take a nap either. Even if you do have time on the delivery, you might not have time due to the retarded 14-hour rule. Oftentimes, there just isn't a whole lot us company drivers can do about this. After all, we don't control what loads we get. But maybe if we had seen the pre-plan the day before, we could have adjusted our sleep. For instance, if you knew you only had 2 hours to drive the next morning and then you had a 10-hour wait to pick up your next load, you might have decided not to sleep for 8 full hours. Maybe you would have only slept for 4 hours and then gotten up 4 hours earlier than when you needed to start driving. So now, after you add your 2-hour drive time, you've been awake for 6 hours. Stay up 3 or 4 more hours and maybe, just maybe, you can lay down and sleep for 6 hours or so. While that's not ideal, that's usually enough to get us through. No matter how you slice it, you can see it will never be ideal, even if we do know what our next day's schedule is. Now I can imagine what all you non-truckers are saying. Well, don't take the load if you need some sleep. Yeah, that leads into the number 4 cause of tired truckers. We get paid by the mile, not by the hour. Unlike our hourly paid brothers in Europe, we lowly U.S. drivers get paid by the mile. While this is great for incentivizing drivers to work harder, it's also the very thing that makes us less safe. We truckers don't get paid big money to do worthless work, unlike so many of the high-level executives that got bonuses for mismanaging their companies to the point of needing bailout money. Part of what went for more bonuses. Again, I say, no, when we truckers get a load that we can legally run, we usually do it. Granted, most of us are smart enough drivers to know when we're about to see polka dot pandas floating across our vision. That's when it's time to pull over before we ass into celebrity's vehicle and yell for the spotlight operator to shine the light on us. It's my firm belief that the vast majority of the problems in the American trucking industry would slowly work themselves out if we were switched to an hourly wage. If the trucking companies had to pay drivers to sit for 5 or 6 hours to be loaded, they'd start cracking down on the shippers and receivers. And if they didn't pay attention, the carriers would raise their rates to force them to pull their heads out. And if they get their act together, then truckers aren't in a rush to deliver, nor are they needing to try to sleep during an unneeded 8-hour break. The problem with the idea of going hourly is that I'm also just as certain that the hourly rate the carriers would come up with would be so low that it would drive even more truckers away from the industry than are already leaving. But that's another issue altogether. Basically, we truckers have to move down the road to make money, and that's what we do. But our friendly Walmart driver has an even bigger problem. Actually, 2. The number 5 cause of tired truckers: minimal home time. There are all kinds of schedules for over-the-road truckers, but the vast majority of us stay out for 2 to 4 weeks, or even longer, and then only get 2 or 3 days at home before we head back out to keep all you fine Americans stocked up on Budweiser and Cheetos. What this means is that we have to try to get as much out of our home time as we can. You're only home for so many hours, and you gotta find time to spend with the spouse and the ankle biters, fix the shower faucet, again, take the car in for service, and get your laundry done. And oh yeah, you might want to sleep some too, if there's time. I don't know about you, but sleep is not usually my top priority when I'm home. It falls somewhere between fixing that stinking repeat offender faucet and spending time watching movies with the evil overlord, or getting killed by the nephews, and every other online player for that matter, in Black Ops 2. The way it works at my house is that I have to conform to everyone else's schedule. The evil overlord and our wallet-sucking nephews stay up really late on the weekends and basically all summer long. But even if they had normal, non-vampirish tendencies, it still wouldn't matter. If I've driven 8 to 10 hours to get home and they're all ready to go to bed when I get there, great, I can hit the sack too. But if they're just getting up, what do you think I do? Go to bed for 8 hours? No, I stay up so I can be awake when they're awake. So maybe I'm shorted on sleep as soon as I get home. Maybe not. But now it's time to hit the road again. Again, I'm on their schedule. If they're getting up at 1 in the afternoon, which isn't uncommon at all, and I need to leave about that time, everything's peachy. That happens about half the time. But say I need to leave at 6 a.m. in order to deliver my load on time. That's about when they're heading to Snoozeville. So what now? Well, for me, that depends on the load. If I've got a long, say, 8 to 11 hours of driving ahead of me, I'll try to lay down and take a 3 or 4 hour nap before it's time to go. But if I've only got 3 to 5 hours to drive, I'll just stay awake and grab a giant mug of coffee on the way out the door. Now, it's possible that this Walmart driver being awake for over 24 hours had something to do with this. He may have wanted to hang out with his family for as long as possible before leaving the house. Guess I can't fault him there. But you do have to be smart about it and get some sleep even when you don't want to. Now, it's a good possibility he overestimated his macho-ness. We men tend to do that, you know. At least I think that's what the evil overlord is implying when she calls me an omega male. If you don't get that joke, tweet me at ToddMcCann and I'll explain. But wait, it's possible that this driver had an even bigger problem. The number 6 cause of tired truckers? Commuting. Now, I'll admit that for the most part, commuting isn't a huge deal for truckers. Most trucking companies allow their over-the-road drivers to take their trucks home, so when they leave their house, their logbook starts counting down. But some drivers don't have that option. Like I said earlier, while Walmart is probably correct in saying the driver was driving legal, they may have neglected to mention that Mr. Roper had a commute that makes the Indy 500 look like a go-kart track. Now, apparently, according to the article I linked to here, Mr. Roper lived in Jonesboro, Georgia, but worked out of a Walmart distribution center in Smyrna, Delaware. You know, sometimes things just work better visually. I have included a picture of a map with the route that he must have taken. It's a Google map. You can either look that route up yourself or click on the link in the show notes, or go to abouttruckdriving.com, type in TD103 in the search bar. Anyway, as you can see from the map, Google says it's a 750-mile commute that will take 11 hours and 23 minutes. And from what I hear, most Walmart over-the-road drivers get home every 6 to 7 days. So it's possible that this guy was making this commute each week. And remember, that 750 miles is one way. Now, according to the Walmart drivers I've talked to, this is a somewhat common practice for Walmart drivers. Granted, the drivers I've spoken with have never heard of a driver living this far from his home terminal. Over a Steak and Shake Sunday, one Walmart driver told me it's so hard to get hired that many drivers will take any driving job Walmart has available just to get their foot in the door. Then, after a position opens at a terminal closer to them, they transfer locations to lessen their commute. Now, this probably doesn't come as a surprise to most drivers. We've all heard the stories about how much money Walmart drivers make. Another Walmart driver said he lived 3 hours from his terminal. He said he always got to the yard early enough to get some sleep before he had to leave. But I'll bet that's not completely true 100% of the time. Now, we don't know Mr. Roper's situation. Maybe he had just moved to Georgia and he hadn't been able to transfer to a closer terminal yet. Or maybe he was tolerating a 750-mile commute just to get his foot in the door. We just don't know. Just like I don't know if any of this upcoming summary of this tragic accident has a shred of truth. But here goes anyway. If I had $100 to spare, I'd be willing to bet you that the accused Walmart driver left the house, drove over 11 hours to work, hopped in his truck, and did a full 11-hour shift. That would put him awake for 22 hours. Figure in some pee breaks and moving his crap from car to truck, and you could easily see him being awake for over 24 hours. Worst case scenario is that he didn't sleep a full 8 hours before he left the house either. And that's a possibility I could easily see happening. So how could this particular accident have been avoided? Well, I'm guessing like so many trucking companies who punish all their drivers for the stupidity of a few, I'd be willing to toss out another $100 that Walmart will be changing this policy about how far a driver can live from a terminal. There doesn't seem to be a limit as of now, but I'd expect one in the future. But this incident is a specific case. So what can be done to stop tired truckers from driving? Nothing really, barring a switch to hourly pay for all CDL holders. That would certainly limit the wasted time at shippers and receivers. But that ain't going to happen anytime soon, if ever. As bad as I hate to admit it, electronic logs help some. But they can't control how much sleep we get before we get behind the wheel either. The hours of service rules definitely need some tweaking to add more flexibility, too. After all, a driver knows when they need to sleep more than the bureaucrats at the FMCSA. So it basically boils down to this. Drivers need to know their limits and get off the road before those adorable polka dot pandas attack. Wow, if I had just said that one line at the beginning, I could have saved myself 3,368 words. Oh well, you know me.
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Man, oh man, have I been getting slammed with feedback. Hey, I ain't complaining. I love getting it. It's just going to take me a while to get through it now. Of course, that's what kind of happens when you don't do a podcast for 2 months, I guess. Kind of builds up. Can't really blame anybody but myself on that one, I guess. So, who do we have first? Oh, dear God. Do I have to read hers? Oh, well. She did write in, I guess. At RaySunshine77, that is her handle on Twitter. Her name is also Jean. She wrote a blog post for me a while back called Trucker Dump 68. This is my life. We all have to be somewhere. This is my life. That was all about riding along with a trucker when you're not actually doing the driving. Check that out if you've got any interest in riding along with a trucker. She writes in on Trucker Dump 101, which was stupid rules that truckers tolerate. This was the one that I had a lot to do with things we had to do at a dock, putting chalk blocks in and putting our keys up in boxes and all kinds of stupid crap like that. She writes and says, "Those pesky little places that want the keys. Ask them which set. That'll really tick them off." We always had 5 sets of keys for the truck we were driving, sometimes more. I had one, hubby had one, the truck had one, there was one for the people that wanted one, and there was a spare located somewhere on the truck just in case all the others got lost. It did happen once. I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, I'll bet you don't want to talk about it. She goes on and says, "I didn't mind exiting the truck when they asked. I would go in with bedhead and a bad attitude, and you can just imagine what happened at the few that suddenly changed their policies and only needed the driver that was actually loading to be inside. I abhorred those places that wouldn't allow both drivers inside the gate, meaning one of us had to sit outside on a curb and wait while the other went inside and loaded. We did that once. The next time it happened, hubby turned around at the gate and told them another truck would be there later to pick up their freight." Gene, I've been wondering about that myself. I'm kind of glad you mentioned it because my oldest nephew, Jacob, has been wanting to come out with me on the road, and I thought of that one day and thought, my God, first off, the evil overlord would kill me, not to mention his mother, if I had to leave him at a Walmart or something somewhere. I guess I would just have to turn around. I don't know what. Maybe I just need to talk to my company ahead of time and find out what I need to do in that situation. He's 15. He could handle it, but I wouldn't want to reap the wrath of the evil overlord on that one. Okay, she goes on to say, "I did laugh at the idea of licking the trailer floor clean. That would violate like 50 health codes and require a trip to the emergency room for the driver that tried it. Hey, next time you have one of those loads, why don't you lick the floor clean and send me a picture? LOL. Yeah, I bet you think that's funny." She says, "Sugar loads I understand more than, say, soup loads. Sugar is really crappily sealed." What she's talking about here is I was complaining about, having to sweep and stuff like that because these little metal shavings might jump up into the air onto the pallet through all the plastic wrap and everything and get wrapped in sugar. So she says sugar is really crappily sealed, so she understands that. It leaks out when you pick it up at the store. I can't imagine what might sneak its way in. But go pick up soup, which is in a metal can placed in a box on a pallet that's shrink wrapped. Some of those places required you to wash the trailer out before you could pick up their precious cargo. Had to bring the receipt, too, which better have a date and time stamp on it. Wow, I don't think I've ever had them do that. Not for canned stuff. Wow, that's bizarre. And she finishes up by saying, "I was missing being over the road until about a minute ago. Thanks for fixing my problem." Well, no problem, Gene. Thank you for writing in. I know it must have been extremely hard to lower yourself from your high and holy place to condescend to write into my lowly blog and podcast. I thank you so much. Psst. Next up, friend of the show, Shannon Holden writes in. He says, "I was just listening to your latest podcast, 101, and heard your email from Ken. I was just wanting to let you know as far as recapping your hours, there are several apps available for iOS devices and even Android, if that's the way you roll. The one I use is called Big Road, and it's free. It's just like a real logbook where you log your on-duty, off-duty, sleeper, etc. Even though my company uses PeopleNet eLogs, I still use this app on my phone to keep a good, accurate recap of my hours. I thought you might want to share this with your listeners. Thanks and take care." Well, you take care, Shannon, and thanks for writing in with this tip. That app again is called Big Road. I have not tried it yet, but I just may do that. As my company keeps telling me I could just write it down, but I'm far too lazy to do that. Maybe if it's on an iPhone, I'll use it. Anyway, our friend Shannon, his handle on Twitter is @Holden657. That's HOLDEN 657. Hey, next up we got Greg. He's starting to become a regular on here too. Appreciate that, Greg. He's writing in on Trucker Dump 101 also, which was, like we said before, stupid rules that truckers tolerate. He says, "I agree on the stupid rules. Some of my pet peeves, shippers and receivers with no weapons allowed signs. Give me a break. What constitutes a weapon? A firearm? A knife? A tire thumper? A rock? The jawbone of a berry? I mean, ass? Another one, shippers and receivers that keep you there most of 14 hours, then require you to leave their property as your 14-hour ball and chain is telling you to go to bed, dumbass. As far as the idle part goes, I drive for a carrier that runs APUs. I haven't caught all your back episodes. Not sure if you've covered personal security out on the road. Your thoughts on packing heat or blades, good or bad idea, especially if going into the rough areas of town. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. Keep up the good work. Oh, come on now, Greg. No weapons? Heck, when you got guns like me, your fists qualify as weapons. Psst. Hey, what's that about a jawbone of a berry? Could that be an Obama joke? I'm guessing it is. You know, I envy you and your APU, but not near as much as I used to. My company's auto restrictions used to be insane, but they've made them more reasonable now, and they're even ordering trucks with inverters and bunk heaters in them now. I've got both in my truck. Can't complain. Well, not until summer anyway. As for the topic of personal security, that's a great idea. And since I haven't covered it yet, I'll withhold my thoughts on the matter until I can whip up a blog post about it. God knows I'm always searching for content. And thanks for the idea. Thanks for writing in also. And Greg, if you've got a Twitter handle, I don't know what it is. I don't think you're following me on Twitter. If you are, and I'm not following you back, I apologize. Let me know. Okay, this next one is a long one from our friend Ken Begtel. He wrote in with a rant a little ways back. He's going to talk about that briefly. This is a long one, like I said. After that, we'll hit one more from Greg, actually. He wrote in with a little poster, little picture he sent was quite funny, so I wanted to share that with you. But like I said, here's Ken. He writes, I just finished listening to the podcast about the rules we all love to abide by. After what I saw last night in Indiana, I was so happy to see a new episode. Keep in mind those rules are only there following horrendous catastrophe, and if you haven't seen it already, please see the picture attached. I'm reluctant to whip out my phone and take pictures from within bathrooms, but I just want the world to know why truckers make enough money as is and should work for even less. Don't worry, the picture is rated G. I'll be putting up a link to this picture in the show notes, but dude, that's pretty sad that this sign like this even has to exist. The sign reads, it's in a bathroom. It says, vandalism of property will not be tolerated. It's a punishable offense and will be prosecuted. This includes the spreading of fecal matter on the walls, floors, and toilets. We are doing our best to keep up with maintaining the restrooms. Please help us do so. Thank you for your cooperation. The management. Man, that is so sad that that sign even has to exist. He goes on to say, additionally, I wanted to thank you for reading my personal rant. I was surprised by my joke about the government using social networking to fine-tune facial recognition software didn't even get a reaction from you. Accepted the truth, I see. To be honest, my rant sounded a bit depressing, even coming from your insightful facehole. I'm doing okay, but I just worried that the good times in trucking are coming to an end. Thanks again for letting me contribute. Well, you know, Ken, text is a funny thing. It can be so hard to convey your true meaning when you can't see someone's face or hear the fluctuations in their voice. That's part of the reason why people can so easily get offended on the internet. I honestly didn't know if your comment about facial recognition was a joke or not. In the future, you might want to add a LOL or a winky face or something so I know you're kidding. As you've heard, I've had all kinds of people with all kinds of viewpoints right into the trucker dump. Government conspiracy theories are nothing new to the trucker dump. I did assume you were joking, but I didn't want to take it that way if you were serious, so I just read it flat and hoped for the best. And you know, everyone, this is a classic example of why I wish everyone would listen to this podcast version of the Trucker Dump instead of reading my articles on the blog. I've always found it hard to relate my true meaning in text. I feel dorky using winky faces, and it really bugs some people to see LOLs in an article. I don't feel like I have to do that on this podcast. I can say something in a sarcastic way, and it's clear to the listeners that I'm joking. Or a quick chuckle might do the trick, too. You know, I do crack myself up sometimes. Oh well, nothing I can do about it. Some people just prefer to read instead of listen. Guess I'll just keep giving it to you all both ways. Ken continues. You read a comment from a female listener worried about how women are treated in trucking, and I need to share what I know. I recently discovered I make as much per year as most proctologists, so consider me Dr. Trucker. Also, as a trainer at CR Faceless, I had every kind of trainee you can imagine. In trucking, there is no time for racism, sexism, or any other ism. A trucker's job is only to move freight from point A to point B as cheaply as possible. There are no heroes. Chances are no one will remember who you are. You're either on time, productive, or late and costly. Focus on silent and reliable service and you will find success. The squeaky wheel doesn't get greased in trucking. It simply goes to the truck without a squeaky wheel to begin with. Don't be afraid to put in the time to become a better trucker. In less than 2 years, you will know so much you can truly explore the freedom of the industry. I had a fellow trainer once tell me he loves trucking because it's the last industry where you're free to do whatever you want, haul all types of freight, see all sorts of cool stuff. He was also a rather stunning cross-dresser, and his message of freedom is really burned into my soul, deeply. I couldn't agree with you more here, Ken. No time for isms. I love that. Although I do have to say I'd probably feel a bit uncomfortable training a cross-dresser. I feel like I'd always have to make a point to anyone who would listen that the dude looks like a lady was my trainee and not my live-in lover co-driver. Yeah, maybe that's sad that I feel that way, but I was raised in a small town and that would take some getting used to for me. I have been to a drag show with the evil overlord and her drag queen friend, but I knew the dude for a while before I saw him dressed like a busty lady. And if you missed that story, that was in episode 74, Trucker Dump 74, called Doing Dallas. And I also agree with you about doing your job and not making a big stink about it. Every dispatcher I've ever had has had problem truckers on their board. In fact, the problem truckers almost always outnumber the easy ones. I always try to be as easygoing as possible. If I get a couple of bad loads, I don't raise a fuss. But after a while, you gotta say something, in a nice way, about getting some good loads for a change of pace. If you let them walk all over you too much, they'll just keep on walking. You're right, though. It's all about the way you present yourself. Keep your company happy, and they'll keep you happy. Well, relatively speaking anyway. This is trucking we're talking about here. And he finishes up by saying, for anyone getting into the industry, I have this advice. Get your CDL from a local trucking school or community college. There are no real standards for getting a CDL. All you need to do is pass a knowledge test, show a DMV inspector you can drive a truck, and prove you got a CDL. Chances are you may not even have to pay. The big companies are only there to fill seats, reduce freight rates, and promote turnover in the industry. If you get your CDL from them and quit, they may come after you for tuition costs. They are the only solution for getting experience, though. Soak in as much information as possible, but don't think for a second that trucking is going to be profitable from the get-go. If you aren't willing to work for free, stay away. It takes months to make decent money because there's so much to learn and apply, and you can only do it from behind the wheel with the door shut. Keep in mind when you hear of a driver shortage, it's because the freight rates are going up, and the only way to combat that is to bring in the drivers who will work for less. Anyone can drive a truck. They're so easy to drive nowadays. I learned to drive in an old Pete with a screaming Detroit, twin-stick transmission, no power steering, no AC, and no front brakes. There's no excuse today for not trucking if you want to. Oops, I rambled again. Off to bed. Thanks, Todd. Well, Ken, I will have to disagree with you here at the end. It is true that there's no excuse for not trucking if you want to, but I'd be more picky about my choice of driving schools. For instance, I wouldn't go to a trucking school just because it was local. I'd want to dig deeper. If they're one of those 2-week CDL farms, I wouldn't want any part of it. The evil overlord and I watched a guy at orientation fail his road test because he couldn't downshift. He went to a 2-week school and said he just didn't get enough time behind the wheel. Maybe he just sucked. Maybe not. And as for those trucking companies that run their own trucking schools, I'd be careful about those too. Sure, they usually don't charge you anything, but like you said, that's only if you're willing to stay at the company for a year or so after school. So if anyone's planning on attending one of those schools, they better make darn sure they like the company before they sign any papers. There is a lot of truth to what you say, though. A CDL is a CDL is a CDL. You've got to get it somewhere, and your choices may be limited. And it's also true that your learning will really only start after you get your first truck. And even then, it's going to take a while to make it worth your time. And dude, it sounds like that old truck you learned to drive in needs to be taken out of service. No front brakes? Yowza. Sounds like if you took that puppy through the chicken coop, the DOT inspectors would have to open up a new box of body cavity search gloves. Thanks for writing in, Ken. And last for today, Greg writes back in. Just a little quick email. Says, thought you'd get a laugh out of this. Well, Greg, you were right. I did get a big kick out of this. It's just a picture. It says, top 10 reasons for parking in the fuel island. Number 10, you thought no one would notice. Number 9, you mistook it for handicap parking. Number 8, you ran out of hours in the fuel island. Number 7, you lost one of your flip-flops. Number 6, you thought you got rewards points for the time you spent in the fuel island. Number 5, your cankles are irritated and it hurts to walk. Number 4, you are a self-righteous, arrogant ass. Number 3, you literally own the truck stop. Number 2, you are God's gift to trucking. And the number 1 reason for parking in the fuel island is you don't know how to back a truck. Good stuff, Greg. Thanks for the laugh right there at the end. Well, I've said it a million times and I'll say it 1,000,001 times. Thanks again for everybody who wrote in. I do appreciate it. If you've written in but you didn't hear your comment on today's podcast, just stay tuned. I'll get to it eventually. Man, oh man. You know, I was telling you guys it took forever to record these podcasts and to edit them and everything. I'm just now finishing recording. Actually, I still have to record the outro. That's usually pretty quick, though. I have been doing this for 5.5 hours. Started at 7 o'clock, finished at 12:30, and I was not interrupted by any rain. I did have to stop about 1,000,000 times to turn the fan on my computer and get it cooled down again. But anyway, it's recorded at least. That doesn't mean it's edited. That will take another 3 to 5 hours. And then I got to do the show notes and get it posted and put out the email that tells people it's coming for those who are subscribed by email. Yeah, it's good times, good times. You people really aren't worth it. I kid. You guys are all worth it. That's why I do it. Anyway, what do we got? Yeah. How about some music? So what did I miss? What makes you too tired to drive? And how do you know when it's time to shut her down? Leave your thoughts on abouttruckdriving.com by typing TD103 into the search bar. Or you can always put a stamp on an email and mail it to truckerdump@gmail.com. @ToddMcCann is my boring Twitter account. Of course, that's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. Hey, if you'd like to help the show, you can always tell a friend or leave a review or a rating in the iTunes store. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast when you're there. Remember, it's free. You know, every little bit helps. Thanks for listening. So until next time, drive safe, stay out of my way.